Hello, my name is Richard Pusateri. I've been a fan of Godzilla movies since 1960 and have written about Japanese monster movies extensively in magazines like G-Fan, Cult Movies, and Japanese Giants. For the next 70 minutes, I'll be your guide on our visit to Monster Island in All Monsters Attack, or Godzilla's Revenge, as it's known in the United States. This movie is controversial among fans of Japanese monster movies, as they cannot decide if it is the worst Godzilla movie ever made or the second worst. Everyone can agree it is one of the most unusual Godzilla movies, and if we look at what makes it so different, we might see that it's not all that bad. I should tell you, this lively theme song we're listening to is not March of the Monsters by Crown Records. The American producers thankfully replaced the original Japanese song, basically a woman screaming the monsters' names, and left only its title in the credits and one syllable of the actual song in the movie. Some comments about this movie I've gathered from the internet are, "What the? Godzilla's nightmare. A total misfire. Why was this movie made? Complete and utter trash. Why bother? This movie deserves 0 stars." But on the other hand, someone wrote, "Godzilla teaches us about the plight of the latchkey kids, and it's like a snow cone, pleasant, sweet, and insubstantial, and who doesn't like a snow cone now and then? I might add, it isn't cold or sticky, and it won't rot your teeth." In his Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film, Michael Weldon described this entry in the Godzilla series as a Godzilla film for 6-year-olds. Most of them are aimed at 10-year-olds. That might actually be the case, and we could enjoy it more if we remember the target audience may well have been Japanese 4th graders. Here is our polluted stage, the busy, noisy, semi-industrial, real-life city of Kawasaki, located between Tokyo and Yokohama. We see a striking montage of motor vehicles as children make their way through the dangerous urban jungle, apparently on their way home after school. Notice the heavy traffic is coming toward the camera as if threatening us, and also crisscrossing in front as if blocking our path. A bridge offers the children safety from traffic until a bully shoves Ichiro aside. Our story begins on the road as our hero, Ichiro, played by Tomonori Yazaki, begins his quest, the journey he must take in order for his character to grow and confront his nemesis, the bully. These shots on the bridge certainly look like a handheld camera. Ichiro tries to talk to his female schoolmate about the monsters, and introducing the second storyline in the parallel universe of Monster Island.
That's pretty exciting. You know anything like that about monsters?
The reaction Ichiro gets from his girlfriend might be familiar to many male fans of Japanese giant monster movies. The loud "go" we just heard is the first syllable of Gojira from the original theme song, and thankfully that is all that remains of it. Now the traffic becomes menacing again. This montage puts the children amid shots of heavy traffic and smokestack industries reflecting Japan's reconstruction after the Second World War, but also amplifying the blight, isolation, and stifling environment of the late 1960s urban Japanese life. 2 years later, similar imagery appears in the next Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Hedorah.
Hi, son. Where are you going?
Now we meet Dad, played by Kenji Sahara, the man who appeared in more Godzilla movies than any other actor. Ichiro's father is distant on his own road, the railroad. He is symbolically alienated from Ichiro, as we never see father and son together in the same frame until the last reel. As Ichiro goes down the road, his interest in odd, shiny things, like old vacuum tubes, this hobby continues to alienate him from the other children. The second train man is played by Yutaka Sada, who is in many Toho science fiction and war movies, And he also had notable roles in some of Akira Kurosawa's biggest movies, including High and Low and Throne of Blood. If talking about Kurosawa movies while watching a Godzilla movie seems odd, please remember that this movie's director, Ishiro Honda, was a colleague and close friend of Akira Kurosawa. There are several stories being told in Godzilla's Revenge. In the real world, the first conflict is Ichiro being tormented by his bully Gabara, and then there's the story of his latchkey existence. Now another storyline is foreshadowed with the introduction of the robbers and their getaway car. The sign painter we will continue to glimpse is played by Yutaka Nakayama, who had roles in many monster movies, including as the hen-pecked husband whose hat flew into the volcano crater with Rodan in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
Everybody goes in there to play all the time.
I can't. Mother says to come home.
Here, Ichiro is alienated. Others don't play well with him.
Ichiro, you better get out.
Uh-oh.
Now, Ichiro has the bully gang before him, and the chiding girl and her mother behind him.
What are you doing here? Oh, Mother. No, you shouldn't play in here. Ichiro, don't play in there.
And notice the girl's mother admonishes Ichiro but ignores his tormentors. Today just isn't going Ichiro's way.
Where'd you get that radio?
Tomonori Yazaki gave a solid, controlled performance as Ichiro without becoming obnoxious. Many child actors in Japanese monster movies were annoyingly precocious, but he conveys the character's moods and reactions to the threats without going over the top.
Go on that guy's motor.
Tomonori had a brief acting career with just one other feature and some television work to his credit.
Little shrimp. You want to try and take it? It's busted anyhow. Hey, look at him go. Hey, oh, crybaby.
Catch him. You want to catch him?
Crybaby.
Baby.
You're crybaby.
Now a police car crosses Ichiro's path, and in a Kurosawa-style transfer of action, we are swept along with the police to gather some important exposition about these robbers. The pace in this movie is accelerated sometimes by that kind of transition where one sequence just rolls right into the next. Ichiro stops to bond with a car, and we'll be seeing more of that car. Most Godzilla movies have an absurd minor plot element not directly linked to the main absurd story, like the recurring gag of the reporter obsessed with eggs in Mothra vs. Godzilla, known as Godzilla vs. the Thing in the U.S. This movie's odd little feature is Ichiro's neighbor is an eccentric toy inventor who has his workshop in his tiny apartment. His new project in 1969 is, get this, a miniature personal computer. The inventor wants it to be an educational toy for children, but Ichiro is still thinking about Monster Island. Yeah, press this button and we see stock footage from Destroy All Monsters, which is now apparently an online Japan news broadcast well before the invention of the internet. The toy consultant is played by wonderful character actor Eisei Amamoto, the human co-star of this film. He is best known to monster movie fans as that international Judas, Doctor Who, in King Kong Escapes. With his distinctive looks, he had many choice roles, large and small, in many Toho movies. But more about Mr. Amamoto later.
Bullies you all the time?
He took a tube, and I couldn't take it away or do anything.
Don't let him take anything.
God, it sure is murder when you're so darn small.
Stand tall. A bum like that will always try to put you down.
I'm late. I think I ought to get going now.
Oh?
You know what? You should get the cries of the monsters in this. See you later.
Now we got an idea that's a real great one.
Okay, watch your step.
Ah!
Does everything with this kid have to be about the monsters? While Shinichi Sekizawa got exclusive credit for the screenplay, director Honda must have had considerable input. The story focused on the changing nature of the Japanese family, and that seems closer to Mr. Honda's interests than to Mr. Sekizawa's. A director would almost certainly add or change dialogue while working on the set with a relatively inexperienced young actor like Tomonori. Mr. Honda was a very competent craftsman who brought the actors' performances to a level of authenticity that made these preposterous movies almost believable. Well, almost. One trademark of Mr. Honda's monster films was his depiction of characters in ordinary situations of daily work or home life. He tried to show how a major disaster would impact the lives of regular people and how they would react to it. After the success of the original Godzilla, he was confined by Toho to directing monster movies almost exclusively. After retiring from directing features in 1975, Mr. Honda assisted his close friend Akira Kurosawa with his later movies like Ran, Dreams, and Rhapsody in August. Note the vintage Bullmark Godzilla toy in the upper left center, signaling that Godzilla exists outside of Ichiro's imagination, and leads to the possibility that Ichiro has been influenced by the Godzilla movies he's watched. Notice the toy has turned itself around. And Ichiro has apparently invented his own computer with wireless telephone capabilities. Now, during a very psychedelic dissolve, Ichiro takes off on stock footage airlines. At this point, it's pretty obvious that this movie has some emphatic flights of fantasy, all contained in Ichiro's dream world. Remember, nothing fantastic happens in the real-life sequences. We do not know if Godzilla exists outside of the movies either. All the monsters and fantasy elements seem to be in Ichiro's imagination. Now, Ichiro goes back to check the galley for honey-roasted almonds. Then he runs up front to find out what the in-flight movie's going to be. And apparently this is a talking airplane that flies itself. Monster Island. In virtually every Toho monster movie, some action takes place on a mythical island. The mythical island is almost a metaphysical archetype in these movies, symbolizing different ideas in different movies. Sometimes symbolizing pre-industrial Japan, sometimes symbolizing nature itself, and sometimes it symbolizes a place where Ichiro can just watch monsters fight and learn about life. Godzilla's entrance is footage from 1967's Son of Godzilla, and we see the suit that is universally considered the ugliest Godzilla suit ever made. Stuntman Haruo Nakajima played Godzilla in almost every scene here. We will see at least 3 different Godzilla suits in this movie, so until we see a better-looking head on Godzilla, I draw your attention to the spectacular work of the wire crews with the giant mantis marionette. Godzilla hates the giant mantises. And the beautiful but often overlooked work of Toho's greensmen providing foliage in all the South Seas Godzilla movies, but especially notable here in Son of Godzilla. Now a monster roll call, courtesy the Toho Film Library. From 1967's King Kong Escapes, we see Gorosaurus, who Ichiro calls Brosaurus. Gorosaurus was also misnamed in Destroy All Monsters, which provided the footage of Manda and Angulus, whom Ichiro calls Annulus. None of these 3 monsters are seen again in this movie. In spite of the mispronounced monsters' names, I like the dubbing of this movie. All my comments are based on this American version, not the Japanese original. The dubbed voices are exaggerated but entertaining, and the use of now dated slang words and phrases adds to the charm. Yeah, look at that. Perhaps the least of all Toho's monsters, the ineffectual giant condor, seen here in a clip from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. At least we will see a nicer Godzilla suit. Giant condor appears like a feathered bolt out of the blue and makes a very awkward attack. Godzilla hates having his tail pulled, and easily dispatches this dispensable bird.
Uh-oh, here comes Kamakarus.
Now, back to footage from Son of Godzilla, we see the giant mantises known as Kamakarus. After an effective pan and a dolly shot, just like Alice in Wonderland, Ichiro tumbles down a hole. We see some very dreamlike imagery in the first of several sequences involving holes. This footage of Kamakarus was filmed for this movie, but I think the rest of the giant mantis shots are all from Son of Godzilla. While Eiji Tsuburaya, the master of Japanese special effects, might have been involved with planning in the early stages of production, illness probably prevented his involvement in the actual shooting, and his credit as director of special effects was purely honorary. Mr. Honda said to save time and money, he directed the special effects scenes in the same small studio that was used for the principal shooting. So this is a very judicious use of the soundstage space. This scene in the underworld might be very suspenseful for children who have an instinctive fear of falling or claustrophobia. This is a very well-lit cavern. And behold, the third and final movie appearance of Minya until 2004, the purported son of Godzilla. Little Man Machan, a dwarf wrestler, was the Minya suit actor. His training as a professional wrestler must have prepared him for the rigorous demands of performing stunts in a suit.
Thanks for saving me.
Why'd you come here?
I just wanted to see you.
Now this looks like a hand puppet Minya, and I think it's a very effective puppet.
So, they're hardly home anytime at all.
This movie is the only film appearance of Gabara, a monster that looks like a cross between a frog and a cat and sounds like a small car that cannot start. The monster Gabara is played by stuntman Hiroshi Sakita. Ichiro establishes that there are two Gabaras, the bully in his world and the monster in Minya's world.
No, I'm chicken.
I know how that is.
Why do you say that?
We both got a Gabara.
Yeah.
And now we have another style of transition back to the real world.
Oh, Daddy!
Hello? This is toy consultant Minami. Huh? Ah, how are you today?
Ichiro's working mom is played by Machiko Naka, who appeared in many of Toho's young guy farces and other romantic comedies. What kind of business mom works in is not clear, but it looks like an inn or a restaurant.
My associate
This brief scene stands out from the rest of the drab settings as it is a pretty location with the wood, earth tones, and the greenery outside the door. The women are wearing lovely traditional clothing, indicating perhaps this is a tea house. And everyone's concerned about these two robbers. Ichiro seems to have bouts of situational narcolepsy as he falls asleep or goes into a coma seemingly at will. The toy consultant could be a father figure for Ichiro, but he really acts like a babysitter. In an older pre-industrial Japan, in a traditional Japanese family, a grandparent would be living with the family and taking care of the children. Perhaps that's another point Mr. Honda is making about the negative impact of modernization on the Japanese family.
Why don't you get up and we'll eat now?
She won't come till tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Shucks, my dad too. Why does my mother always do that?
Your mother has to work long hours. But don't worry about eating. Supper's at my house tonight. All right? Maybe we have some sukiyaki. You're still downcast.
Uh-huh.
I see. Well, then we'll do something about that.
Ina, where are you? Come and get me.
So chanting himself into another trance does not work this time. So instead of taking a nap or having dinner with the toy consultant, without parental supervision, Ichiro goes trespassing again. Without playmates, it's hard to have fun. Gabara's gang has to fish in this relentlessly grim and probably polluted industrial environment. There's another confrontation with the bullies, but Ichiro chooses to drop the rocks and escape down another path, perhaps standing up to the bully Gabara another time. The exterior of the old building looks like a matte painting with facial features like eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And the interior looks like a location to me, but most authorities think it is a soundstage or a set on the Toho backlot because of the room needed for the elaborate camera work and lighting. Inside the old building, there's a lot of camera movement, and the lighting is quite interesting, dim enough to convey mystery or perhaps a sense of danger, but bright enough to see what's going on. More vacuum tubes. This abandoned setting reminds me somewhat of the bomb-damaged post-war hideout Toshiro Mifune's character uses in The Bad Sleep Well, and it might remind Japanese viewers of damage from World War II. The signage tells us what floor Ichiro is on, so we don't think he's going up the same staircase over and over. And I really like this point of view shot of the yard. I don't know why, but it looks like a miniature set to me. But I know it isn't. And I guess the police are constantly cruising the city with sirens on, looking for the robbers. What was that? More junk. Better check it out. Oh, broken headphones. Yeah, those might come in handy. Another hole to parallel the one Ichiro fell through on Monster Island. As if the bully Gabara and being a latchkey child weren't enough conflict for our hero, here are the robbers, our real bad guys. The subplot of the comically inept robbers is really disconnected from the other story, even though the adult characters keep talking about them. Maybe it's not strange that the whole community is fixated on this one robbery, as Japan had such a low crime rate in the late 1960s. Many Toho movies have multiple storylines because they are quite the committee project, even more so than in Hollywood. And sometimes the multiple plots never merge. Sachio Sakai, the leading bank robber with the jacket and tie, appeared in many, many Toho movies, usually as a henchman or a thug, as in our movie. He had a brief but prominent scene in Kurosawa's 1948 film Drunken Angel. He was a thug in the movie that ended up as Woody Allen's What's Up, Tiger Lily. But most important for Godzilla fans, he was featured as the reporter Hagiwara in the original Godzilla. Kazuo Suzuki, as the dim-witted bank robber, was also in many Toho movies. The shot of the sky cluttered with industrial objects establishes that the sun is setting. And Ichiro bonds again with the car.
Hey, get away from that car. You mustn't do that.
I think this concerned bystander protecting the car is played by Shigeki Ishida. He appeared in many Toho comedies, and the dubbing seems to match his prissy character very well in this enjoyable scene. By now you've probably noticed we haven't seen much of Godzilla in this movie. Ichiro and Minya are the real stars. Godzilla only makes a few appearances and advances the narrative in only one or two scenes. The sunset lighting of the room reminds us of the already established time of day. And notice that the sunset reflects off the hood of the car. This whole sequence has been lit that way. There are several movies in the Godzilla series that do not star Godzilla. In fact, more often than not, Godzilla shares billing with other monsters. Godzilla played the villain and second banana to King Kong in King Kong vs. Godzilla and to Mothra in Mothra vs. Godzilla. Two other Godzilla movies, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and Monster Zero, are even named after King Ghidorah, so Godzilla may have been appearing in a King Ghidorah movie. This might even really be considered a Minya movie, like Son of Godzilla.
Okay.
That was a very nice transition. The robber looks up, sees the action taking place on the balcony, and in a shift reminiscent of Kurosawa, we go upstairs too and join the toy consultant and Ichiro having dinner. The toy consultant is played by Eise Yamamoto, a great character actor with an unforgettable face and a deep but versatile voice. Mr. Yamamoto portrayed an amazing variety of characters. In the United States, he was seen in What's Up, Tiger Lily as the snake-loving bartender. While Guy Tucker reports in his book Age of the Gods, Yamamoto disliked his work in this movie, Tucker thinks the role was close to Yamamoto's own real personality. If he disliked this role, it's a tribute to his acting ability because the character is portrayed so naturally and convincingly. In 2001, Mr. Yamamoto made one of his last appearances in Shusuke Kaneko's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, usually called GMK, as the mysterious prophet who warns about the monsters about to appear in Japan. Earlier, we met these policemen that dress like Water and Power employees at Mom's workplace. The local police formally introduced themselves. The officer doing the talking here is Yoshifumi Tajima, one of the most famous faces in Toho's science fiction movies. He had prominent roles beginning as a reporter in 1956's Rodan. He is famously known as Kumeyama, the great entrepreneur in Mothra vs. Godzilla. Shotaro Togen, the assistant detective, had a co-starring role in Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, as well as many roles in Toho's war and comedy movies. Possibly this crawling hand is an homage to the crawling hand of Frankenstein Conquers the World. This film has a great cast of wonderful character actors in minor supporting roles. They were on contract to Toho, and in the Japanese studio system of that time, they reported to work each day and waited for assignments.
I'm hungry.
That resulted in actors being in a large number of movies and sometimes working on 2 or more movies in a single day.
Hey, stop. First, we got something important to take care of. I sure hope we can still find that house where that kid lives.
Yeah, I can find it.
Okay. Hey, you. Hide it. Let's go.
Another psychedelic dissolve that D.W. Griffith would be proud of. Stuntman Hiroshi Sekida, playing Monster Gabara, was often overlooked as the other monster in many of the 60s Toho monster movies. I think Mr. Sekida was in the Godzilla suit once or twice in earlier movies. Now here's an interesting special effect that recalls another scene in Kurosawa's Drunken Angel, where a dead Toshiro Mifune chases the living Toshiro Mifune via similar optical compositing. That was close. I really like this reunion with Minya theme music that announces Ishiro's continuing bonding with Minya. It's a nice melodic change of pace from the recurring surf rock theme.
Feeling lonesome because I got no friends.
We're both alive.
Why'd you come back, huh?
I like it here. And I also want to see your daddy, Godzilla.
I'll introduce you.
There's that lovely hand puppet again, which reminds me more and more of Jerry Mahoney around the eyes, don't you think?
Why's that?
The success of Daiei's Gamera series must have affected the thinking at Toho. Tomoyuki Tanaka, producer of the Godzilla series, was almost certainly influenced by both the success and relative low cost of Gamera vs. Virus, which came out a year before in 1968. A lighthearted story focusing on children, entire scenes of special effects footage from earlier movies, and a child actor in the starring role were trademarks of Gamera movies that now appeared in Godzilla's Revenge for the first time in Godzilla history. Now we witness a monster rally, beginning with footage from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Here Mr. Sekida is Ebirah battling Mr. Nakajima as Godzilla.
Oh, watch out now! Hey! Oh, hey!
This rock tossing is another fine example of Toho's expert wire work, supervised by Fumio Nakadai. That looks like an animated rock, actually. And I suspect that catch was actually done by reversing the film. Now Godzilla takes the battle to Ebirah. Ooh, Godzilla hates to be splashed. Crew members have said that vapor is not from dry ice, but actually liquid nitrogen released into the water. Working in a lobster suit in that environment must have been quite a challenge. There must have been at least 2 Ebirah suits, one for Mr. Sekida to wear and one empty full-scale suit for Godzilla to toss around. This is a key scene from the original 1966 Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster that features a rare underwater shot of a Godzilla suit in action that lasts a few seconds.
Strong underwater.
then back to shots of the illusion of being underwater provided by filters and other lighting effects. Coming up, for a split second, we can see 3 orange spots on the front of Godzilla's neck. I suspect for the water chute, Mr. Nakajima's eye holes were plugged, or it could have been unrepaired damage to the suit.
Where's Godzilla going?
Let's follow him.
Now we will jump to footage from Son of Godzilla. I always admired the greensman's work in these scenes. Then we go back to the disfigured Son of Godzilla suit. Ichiro identifies the giant spider as something like Gomogora, but we know it as Kumanga, or Spiga as it's called in the American version of Son of Godzilla. The Kumanga marionettes were very good looking with great detail, but special effects man Teruyoshi Nakano said they were extremely difficult for the crews to operate. This sequence is indescribably strange. The giant spider shoots something into Godzilla's right eye. Was that scene anything for children to see?
Get him, Godzilla! Go on! He can't do that to you! Oh, go ahead!
I think Minya just went through a quick sumo wrestling posturing. It's barely noticeable, but the Minya suit also went through some changes for this movie. But unlike Godzilla, I don't think any shots of the old suits are in this movie. Hey, don't look at me when you say that. That's an example of the charming, anachronistic language used in this American dubbing that I enjoy.
What happened? What was the matter with your breath?
It isn't strong enough yet, but it'll get worse. Godzilla's the one with the bad breath.
Note that giant spiders have their silk spinnerets in their mouth parts, giving them the ability to spit silk. Men who worked on these movies said that they sometimes melted styrofoam to get the material for the flying silk effects. I can't think of many things scarier to be around than molten styrofoam.
Godzilla's gone down.
It's okay.
Godzilla hates to get covered in silk and knocked down.
Yay! We won! We won!
What was that?
Gamera!
But the victory was short-lived. The promotion for this movie seemed to take a bipolar course. The trailer emphasized the scarier parts, like ferocious monster fighting, including some violence not seen in the finished movie. Most of the music was creepy, and none of the children, other than Ichiro, were shown. On the other hand, the heavily retouched promotional still photos emphasized the group of children and showed no hint of the conflict between Ichiro and the rest. The still photos presented the children as one big happy group. So maybe the advertising department thought the trailers would reach the adults and the printed material was the way to reach the children. Ah, my freaking eyes! Well, here's another unique contribution from this film. Minya apparently has the ability to will himself to grow 25 times his size. Minya shows his spirit and attempts a sparring match with Gabara, and we are filled with sympathy for Minya. I hate Gabara. We see Little Man Machan's wrestling chops here.
Now I think I'll run.
Yeah, we are filled with sympathy for Minya. What could happen next?
We're safe now.
Boy, that Gabber's stronger than the one I know.
Yeah, this
For the time being, we're safe. Well, a formation of F-86 Sabre jets suddenly fly overhead. Godzilla looks up, and the F-86s transform themselves into MiG-21s. Lifted from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, this scene is one of my personal favorites of the entire Godzilla series. I believe every Godzilla movie has one standout, excellent special effects scene, and unfortunately the money shot in this movie was really from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. The shots of the F-86s that morph into MiGs were not in the original Sea Monster. In this movie, it's a 1-minute surrealistic masterpiece. These planes just attack Godzilla for no apparent reason, totally outside the story, but it's excellently realized, great coordination between the wire workers, the pyrotechnics guy, and Mr. Nakajima in the suit. It's a lot of fun and things get blowed up real good. Too bad it was lifted from another movie. Now we come to the turning point in Minya's character arc. This is the first footage of Godzilla we see that was shot for this movie. This is the Destroy All Monsters suit with a refurbished head. Interestingly, while this scene was filmed for this movie, it virtually recreates an almost identical scene from Son of Godzilla.
Just like I do.
This shot here must be out of sequence because on the far right we see smoke from an event that has yet to occur. Ishiro Honda directed the special effects scene himself, which makes this movie all the more personal for him. Mr. Honda received technical assistance from Teruyoshi Nakano, longtime assistant to Eiji Tsuburaya. Mr. Nakano would officially take over as Toho's director of special effects on later films, beginning with Godzilla vs. Gigan. Eiji Tsuburaya's chief wire effects man, Fumio Nakadai, also probably assisted in the special effects scene. Now, Godzilla approves of Minya's handiwork, and Minya is overjoyed that his bad breath has finally gotten worse.
Terrific, huh?
A new threat, a grabby plant monster, a kidnapping philodendron. No, the strange vines of Monster Island are really the incompetent criminals who now add kidnapping to their resumes. I guess the strange vines kept Ichiro's headphones. The apartment has a drab industrial look that reflects the ambiance of Kawasaki's environment. I wonder if Mr. Amamoto's clothing was the standard uniform of toy consultants who work at home. Mr. Amamoto's wardrobe and appearance in this film reinforce his reputation as an eccentric.
Ishiro?
In real life, he often did wear a skull cap.
kid. You got my
Now, things really get bad for Ichiro while the robbers keep trying to steal a car. The implied threat is that he knows too much to be let loose. Yeah, the robber looks very casual here, like, I'm not going to steal a car. The robbers really like that car. Well, everybody seems to like that car. It's a Toyopet Crown, Japan's first domestically produced prestige car. Ordinarily, I would suspect some product placement going on, but it's an older model, so maybe it's a symbol of the Japanese economic recovery, or maybe it's just a car.
The usual.
Our film now benefits from a very brief cameo by veteran Toho character actor Ikio Sawamura as the snack vendor with his back to us here. Mr. Sawamura's dubbed question doesn't make much sense, but great comic facial expressions like his were beloved by Japanese audiences. He had distinct cameo roles in almost every Toho science fiction movie since Battle in Outer Space in 1960, and he had a featured role as the corrupt town sheriff in Kurosawa's Yojimbo. The answer to Mr. Sawamura's question was a transition back to the robbers in Ichiro.
Why is he taking so long to get that car?
And there's that hole that parallels the hole Ichiro fell into on Monster Island. The more the robber tipples, the more he begins to look like Shemp Howard. And speaking of Monster Island, that's where Ichiro is going to transport himself after chanting Minya's name.
Minya-san. Minya's a monster.
Smart kid, huh?
And off into another self-induced trance. And Minya has his own problems, in spite of his plucky attitude. Earlier, I said this was Minya's final appearance. Well, in the interests of full disclosure, I should tell you that a reimagined Minya appears 35 years later in Godzilla Final Wars in 2004. To be accurate, I should say this is the last appearance of the classic Showa Minya. Gabra reveals his special powers, paralyzes Minya, and we are filled with sympathy for the son of Godzilla. If only there were some way to put pressure on Minya's tail to induce fully energized bad breath.
Get out! Gabber will get you!
That rock. Minya's tail? Finally, a shot of bad breath connects to Gabra's nose, right in the snot locker. Gabara hates Minya's jackass impression, and Mr. Sakita really gets his Gabara on. The confrontation with Gabara escalates, but Godzilla insists Minya fight his own battles, with some really choice suit acting from Mr. Nakajima. All the suit acting in this sequence is really good. Scary Gabara. Godzilla knees Minya in some emphatically tough love. Earlier I described Minya as the purported son of Godzilla because I am not convinced that he is. Just because Godzilla was around when the egg hatched does not prove he fathered it. I guess the baby fins on Minya's back show he's related to Godzilla, but it's hard to imagine Minya growing up to be another king of the monsters. Godzilla finally intervenes, but Minya is still ready to fight. Maybe take a chunk out of Gabbara's arm. Minya withdraws from the battlefield. Gabbara retreats. In virtually every film Mr. Honda made, characters took an uphill mountain hike, even on the moon, as in Battle in Outer Space.
We can beat him. Come up here. Mina!
Here, Minya takes a scaled-down version of the signature walk.
Look, Mina. You see that
Ichiro
tree down
and
there?
Minya take a strategy session to decide how to scientifically get rid of Gabbara.
Hey, get set.
If Gabbara would just step on the end of that log.
Well, here goes.
This is another especially delirious scene. I like that sound effect.
Yay! You did it!
This music seems a little out of place for this scene. Godzilla approves of Minya and Ichiro's handiwork. Now Godzilla prepares to finish off the wounded Gabbara. Mr. Nakajima in the Godzilla suit and Mr. Sakita in the Gabbara suit had plenty of practice fighting like monsters in War of the Gargantuas, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, and King Kong Escapes. These matches were probably choreographed by Mr. Nakajima, and I think they're genuinely exciting. Our movie is not scored by the maestro of Godzilla music, Akira Ifukube, but by Kunio Miyauchi, whose bright, bouncy score, with its main battle theme reminiscent of the Munsters theme, is appropriate for a children's action movie. Mr. Miyauchi's themes are especially effective during these battle sequences. Mr. Miyauchi's music doesn't have the same commanding presence as the compositions of Mr. Ifukube or Masaru Sato, but his background in television shows like Ultra Q and Ultraman qualified him to score a light action fantasy feature movie. The main action theme is an up-tempo surf rock number repeated often, but Mr. Miyauchi also provides several pretty, almost Baroque themes, especially the melody usually associated with Ichiro. That's some really good suit acting by Mr. Nakajima. Will Gabbara ever return?
Gabbara has lost again.
No, he never returns. As he limps off through the forced perspective miniature tropical rainforest, Gabbara is vanquished for keeps this time, never to be seen again. Unless you watch this DVD again. There's something we rarely see in these movies. Godzilla makes eye contact with a human, and here the monster seems to acknowledge Ichiro. We transition back to the reality of the robber's hideout where Ichiro faces his greatest, most dangerous crisis. This movie was a tipping point in the Godzilla series. After the big-budget, star-laden 11-monster classic extravaganza of Destroy All Monsters the previous year, this movie was a drastic shift away from the large cast, elaborate miniature sets, and extensive special effects. All Monsters Attack is an unusual monster movie, relying on lots of stock footage with noticeably lower production values, causing intense fan indifference. The next Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, was unlike any movie anyone had ever seen regardless of genre, but it didn't appear to suffer from the same tiny budget as All Monsters Attack. After the weirdness of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, the rest of the early 70s movies continued to decline in production values with tired plots, lesser-known actors, skimpier budgets, and increasing use of footage from earlier movies, and they lacked the involvement of Mr. Honda, Mr. Tsuburaya, and Mr. Ifukube. Mr. Tsuburaya passed away in 1970, shortly after this movie's release, and Toho restructured the special effects department. Those personnel changes shook up the entire system of making special effects movies. Space Amoeba, or Yog, Monster from Space, was the last Toho monster movie made in the recognizable format of the golden age of the late 50s and 1960s. The box office did not match the achievements of the 60s either. In 1967, Son of Godzilla sold 3,090,000 tickets. In 1968, Destroy All Monsters slid down to 2,580,000 tickets, and All Monsters Attack attracted 1,480,000 paying customers. Even though Mr. Honda and Mr. Ifukube returned for Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975, the box office take was less than 1 million tickets, compared to 12.5 million tickets sold for King Kong vs. Godzilla in 1962. Neither the Godzilla series nor Toho's other special effects movies ever did as well at the box office, nor did they reach the technical and artistic heights of the late 1950s or 60s. We approach the next climax with Ichiro and the robbers at the getaway car they have obsessed over since the first act, and Minya's personal growth and words of wisdom inspire Ichiro to tackle these bullies. As we watch a child outsmart two adults, we can reflect that this is indeed a children's movie. It was the first Godzilla movie to star a child actor. Tomonori did such an impressive job in this movie that today there are American collectors of vintage Godzilla vinyl toys who regularly petition Bandai Toy Company representatives for an Ichiro action figure. In later films, the children became more annoyingly precocious. We can be certain that our movie was made for children because it was the first feature entry in the Champion Festival. In 1969, Toho began a series of programs for children similar to Saturday matinees that featured special effects feature films, sports, animated, and other short subjects. The 70-minute running time for All Monsters Attack set the benchmark for the rest of the entries, with the next feature in the Champion Festival, King Kong vs. Godzilla, being edited down to the hour 10-minute length. Ichiro faces the danger. Will he escape or confront?
All right. You get on and watch the front door. I'm gonna look on the second floor. Go.
Is he being chased, or is he leading the robbers where he wants them to go? Don't touch that pipe. Oh! Another hole. All Monsters Attack is by no means a typical Godzilla movie. The only fantastic elements, the monsters, are in Ichiro's imagination, and the monsters never leave Monster Island.
He's on the third.
All the action is compressed into less than 24 hours of Ichiro's life.
Look over there. Come on.
Mr. Honda often zoomed in on actors looking towards the camera or through things, like this, several times before in Attack of the Mushroom People or Destroy All Monsters. The toy consultant finally recognizes his own car after a thorough examination. This movie falls in the group of most unusual Godzilla movies with Godzilla vs. Hedorah and Godzilla Final Wars. We rarely see Godzilla, who has as little screen time as he did in Invasion of Astro Monster, or Monster Zero, as it's known in the United States. In recent years, some serious Godzilla fans have discovered that if viewed as a low-budget children's fantasy movie, Godzilla's Revenge is actually a well-crafted cautionary fable of the plight of children in late 1960s industrialized Japan. Another zoom looking through something. The trap is finally sprung. Down, down, down. Just like Ichiro on Monster Island.
Where is he? Where are you?
Down here.
Where's that?
Look through the hole.
Hole in the floor.
Oh, for crying out loud. What? Get out of there, you dummy.
Now Ichiro's in control. He has the robbers right where he wants them.
See the kid. Where is he?
On top.
What's this hole? There he is. Hey, wait.
And here's a recapitulation of the earlier scene of Gabara pursuing Ichiro. The American dubbers even try to make the robber even sound like Gabara. There's the cinematic cliche of a character being chased, falling, looking back at the pursuer, and reacting. Mr. Honda used it often. As a great pratfall in physical comedy, Sachio Sakai must have been at least 40 years old at this time, and I don't think of him being a stuntman, so his feat here is especially impressive. An explicit parallel with Gabara, in case you missed the implied connection a minute ago. The building's interior now is quite well lit here as compared to earlier scenes. As if to signify the mood is now lightened, Ichiro uses his lessons learned on Monster Island to fight back. Inside the old building there are lots of neat camera moves, dolly shots that really explore and use the room space. Just as Minya stood up to Gabara, Ichiro stops running and confronts the robber. Using his brains and a fire extinguisher that resembles Minya's breath, Ichiro has triumphed over the villain.
That's Ichiro.
Stop, you practice. All right. Hands up, mister.
All right, come on.
Get him
Come
up.
on. Move slowly this way. Come on.
Let's go.
Come on.
Put down that knife.
Take it easy.
Drop the knife. Right now. Come on. Come on. Grab him now. Don't let him get All right. Come on. Come on. Get in there.
Wait a minute.
Hey,
And
you.
this wins the prize for least effective getaway in the history of crime.
Come on.
The robber's storyline has reached a resolution, and the toy consultant stands in for father again, reminding us of Ichiro's unresolved alienation from his parents.
Now, your mother and dad will be home shortly. I'll take care of you till they get here.
Is he okay?
Yeah, he's fine.
All right. Let's get him in the car, please.
Now it's the following morning. Ichiro is back home. and reunited with Mom for breakfast in a brightly lit, happier domestic scene.
I won't do it again.
Mom expresses sorrow and says she won't work at night again. Our hero accepts that,
I will hear all day,
but he knows she must earn money and says he's okay with that. He has grown during his ordeal with the robbers. Ichiro seems well adjusted now.
Bye. Take care.
But notice Mother weeps. Could it be she knows for her nothing has really changed? Ichiro is a crime-stopping media star now.
Hey, Cheryl, were you scared in there alone?
He better negotiate a book deal quick.
Who was there? Who was with you? Yeah. Yeah, Cheryl. Who was it? Huh?
Minya-san.
Mania. Oh, yeah, sure know.
In case you missed the part about the relationship between Minya, Godzilla, and Ichiro, the toy consultant back announces this exposition, explaining to the reporters what we've been watching for the last hour and 6 minutes.
Yes. As we adults always look up to big heroes, this child is inspired by a monster. I've known issues like that.
Now we approach the movie's next climax in the real world. Ichiro approaches the ultimate challenge of his quest on the road, the showdown with the bully Gabara. It's high noon in Kawasaki. Have any of the children, other than Ichiro, changed clothes since yesterday?
Get out.
What have all these adventures taught Ichiro?
Gabra, we're not scared of you and your gang.
He's apparently learned to get in the first shot, or at least a preemptive headbutt. A nice, interesting montage of still shots, an innovative cinematic technique, or something went wrong with the camera. We hear the battle theme music.
Oh, bully's all right. You can't
Bully Gabara is defeated in the real world. Ichiro is triumphant and empowered. He continues on his quest. Now, imbued with newfound inner strength, Ichiro inexplicably begins a sociopathic crime wave. His first victim is the sign painter, Yutaka Nakayama, who's apparently been on that ladder for about 24 hours now.
Hey, don't honk that horn! Hey,
An excellent bit of physical comedy, culminating in the paint-in-the-face sight gag, worthy of Buster Keaton. This whole scene has the look of the silent comedies of Charlie Chaplin or Laurel and Hardy.
Call the police!
Hurry up, everybody, get out of here. Come on, we gotta go.
Hey, you! Come back! Come back! Come back!
Hey, Dad.
In a reconciliation of sorts, we finally see father and son together in the same frame,
Favor, will you? Huh?
as Ichiro enlists his own father to obstruct justice.
I'm sorry.
And there's more silent movie-style action. As the ending music wells up, we see Ichiro has literally become the new Gabara, and he leads his crew off down the road, undoubtedly looking for a new nerdy kid to pick on. And with that, like Godzilla says, I'm off to fight my own battles, and I hope to see you again on Monster Island soon. So long.